experiences.
Thank you. Well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kramer. Your lean, agile, fast reminds me of my high school football coach who said he wanted us to be mobile, agile, and hostile. I'm not going to go into our record, but our team motto was, we're small, but we're slow. That was our problem. Senator Gillibrand.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your budget request this year includes a goal of increasing the number of Space Force launches. As you look to maintain and modernize launch ranges and facilities in support of our space launch needs, can you speak to how the ability to leverage commercial funding sources to grow space transportation infrastructure and service capacity would impact the Space Force's space launch efforts?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. As we've talked before, we've grown our capacity on our national launch ranges, national space launch ranges, from what I remember to be 10, 12 launches to we're going to getting close to 100 launches a year now. And most of that is commercial launches. And so the infrastructure that we're providing is being used, and it needs to be refurbished on a more regular basis than it did what I'd call the old days. And so I think the commercial industry understands this, and they're trying to figure out the best ways to help support. And now we just have to look for the contractual and legal mechanisms to make sure that we can maintain that infrastructure. Our investments in the range of the future start us down that path, but we've still got a lot of work to do over the FIDEP, I think, to make sure we maintain the kind of infrastructure we need to support the commercial industry.
As you've said, your mission is very technical. Ensuring Guardians are properly trained and able to execute their missions requires access to advanced ranges. Do you currently have the training resources you need to provide fully trained Guardians to combatant commanders? And are any additional resources required to ensure we have a Space Force fully capable of operating in the space domain?
The FY24 budget submission includes about $340 million dedicated to operational test and training infrastructure. I think that's sufficient for this year because we've got a lot of study to do to make sure we're building the right kind of ranges, the right kind of simulators, and we're learning as we go a little bit. So I'm really comfortable with the level of investment we're at this year for FY24.
Last week, you spoke about the concept of competitive endurance. From reporting, it appears to center on space domain awareness, resilience to deter attack, and responsible counterspace activities. Can you speak to how the Space Force's budget proposal will help to achieve competitive endurance through each of these three core tenets?
For avoiding operational surprise, that's the space domain awareness tenet, and we are investing heavily in new sensors. We're investing in capabilities with our allies and partners to also increase the data set associated with space domain awareness. And perhaps most importantly, we're investing in space command and control capabilities, which is kind of military talk for how do you take that data in and rapidly turn it into operational decisions. And so I think we have good software investments to make sure that we're doing the decision support tools that go with that space domain awareness. And go ahead.
Go ahead, no, finish.
Well, the resiliency piece is also important, and this budget definitely invests in shifting to a more resilient space architecture. We've started that pivot now in earnest.
So looking on your documents, you have this contested space document about what China's doing. The PRC has developed counterspace and anti-satellite weapons, including demonstrations of anti-satellite missiles, which you say are launching orbit to ground. And the ability to move a defunct satellite. Can you speak to our ability to defend against these counterspace assets and exercise space superiority?
The transition to a proliferated LEO missile warning, missile tracking architecture includes the capacity to find, fix, and track hypersonic capabilities. So that's why that's such an important transition that we're making. With regards to grappling satellites and pulling them out of orbit, much tougher to deal with when you have less than maneuverable older legacy satellites. So again, shifting to a proliferated LEO constellation where you don't have what General Hyten called the big juicy target sitting there at GEO, makes that a much tougher proposition for them to execute against.
That makes sense. What lessons are you learning from the war in Ukraine about the role of the space domain in large-scale military operations?
Well, the most important observation is that space is critical to modern warfare. We've seen the Russians attack satellite communications. We've seen cyber attacks trying to dismantle. We've seen GPS jamming. They recognize that space is a force multiplier, and they're willing to attack it. The fact that we have to defend against cyber attacks in the ground networks reminds us that ground is also a part of space and that those networks are critical assets. But I think we're also seeing the power of commercial augmentation, that there is a viable path for commercial augmentation to provide capabilities. And then I've been kind of harping on it through the testimony here, but proliferated LEO, that's what we're seeing used to support Ukraine, and it's turning out to be a much tougher target for the Russians to take apart.
Agreed.